All right, free agents, welcome back to my podcast. You know me, I am Meg Schmitz. This is going to be a blast today. I'm very excited about our episode today. Just for those of you who have not been listening to this show, but you've heard the name John Tarnoff, and now you're back for more. The mission of my show is to share inspiring conversations with real people who took the leap into self-employment, business ownership, franchising, and freedom. From corporate refugees and executives tired of the desk job to entrepreneurs and investors looking to share camaraderie and inspiration through their own business journey, my podcast aims a spotlight on real people who stepped into the unknown, took control of their destiny, and became their own boss. Today, I am delighted to have back John Tarnoff, who is my number one downloaded guest of all time.
Oh my God.
Go figure that one out, John. And it may be because of one little word that really governs the work that you do. You wrote a book called the Boomer Reinvention. And I think that that's a word that you have lived. I know that it's a word that you've lived in your own career, but now you're seeing it all over the place. So welcome back. Let's jump into what's new in the world of reinventions.
Well, everything is new in the world of reinvention, kind of by definition. And Meg, it's great to be with you as always. I'm so glad to have received the call and so glad to be here.
Thank you. The literally number of downloads on a month-by-month basis is continuing to grow. I don't see that happen very often. Usually there's a spike, but you're out there and people are finding you. Talk about the relevance of the work that you're doing and just how pervasive it is.
Well, I'm not surprised that you are getting traffic on the word reinvention. I'm humbled that I happen to be the guy behind that word on that particular episode. But it is not surprising to me that in a world that is changing so much, and I mean, I've been dining out on this for the last 10 years, but the world continues to change in ways that 5 minutes ago we could not have predicted. I mean, how many times a week, a month do we look at a headline or watch something on TV and go, you can't make this stuff up, right? Because we are traveling at such a crazy clip. So I think that pace of change produces two responses generally. One is close it down. I'm not listening to this. I'm holding on for dear life to what I've got. I've got to batten down the hatches, dig the bunker, or it's okay. How do I respond? How do I get ahead? How do I get on top of this curve to avoid getting overwhelmed? I'm going to mix metaphors wildly here, to get washed out by the wave. And I think in the pandemic, we saw on a business level, we saw this operating out with companies, the ones that took advantage of this misfortune, got ahead of it with their customers, changed their systems around so that they could maintain their business, were the ones that pulled through. The ones that said, we're going to take a break, we're going to kind of dig in, hunker down, and we'll see you on the other side. By the time there was another side, they were gone. No one cared about them anymore, right? And those are the storefronts that you see. Whatever happened to that business? Oh, I guess they went bust during the pandemic. Didn't have to be that way. Reinvention.
And I think you see it so spectacularly. Not only are you in a state, California, that's got, you've come through the pandemic in a different way than the 49 other states have come through it. Whether that's good or bad. But are you seeing now, here we are in 2023, you're a full 3 years after the start of this crazy thing. Are you seeing more certainty in the reformulation, in people's willingness? Or are they still, like we talked about the last time, there was so much uncertainty that this reinvention thing was kind of squiggly and hard to wrap your arms around. Is it more certain now?
I don't think so. I think that it is, I think we are getting used to the uncertainty in the sense that not that we necessarily have a better handle on it, but I think we expect uncertainty now more than we did. I think there is perhaps a greater sense of resilience around uncertainty, and this sense that uncertainty is no longer a random, rare occurrence in an otherwise stable world, but that in fact, our daily mindset is one of finding some sense of stability or some thread of continuity in the midst of an otherwise unstable, uncertain, unpredictable world.
Yeah, continuity, reliability, predictability, those are all words that I live in the world of franchising, and people, it's human nature to want to
Yes.
have that sense of predictability. And
I think what we are coming to understand, and I think this was always true, is that there's no free lunch, there's no certainty. And you talk about the franchise business as a kind of a hedge against uncertainty. But I think at the end of the day, all it is a hedge. All it is a smart calibration of uncertain factors and putting some gates in place and some processes in place to create a more predictable, more regular, more expectable outcome. But the uncertainty is still there. And I'm sure that in the franchise business, the streets are littered with franchise concepts that have come and gone.
that is absolutely a fact. It doesn't matter what sector of big business we're talking about, big or small. It has been a world of change and churn. And the leaders of these companies, they're just normal human beings who have their own foibles and quirks and concerns about everything that has happened over the last 3 years. Do you see a particular age category or male versus female that are doing a better job of embracing the change that we're talking about?
Well, I think generally, and I hesitate to make a generalization, but it's kind of part of our culture to see that younger people, because they have they don't have the the baggage, and by necessity need to invent the future, right? They need to embrace the new, because what else is there? And older people, because we have baggage, we'll tend to want to hold on to what we've got. So within that framework, I would say, for the most part, I think older people are learning to, and if they're not, they really need to learn to embrace change, embrace uncertainty. And I think we all need to rely on our differences, generational differences, cultural differences, economic differences, all the differences that make up our whole synthesis. That's what makes us strong, right? Is our ability to not stay in our bubbles, but to venture out and to get into dialogue with people across all sorts of differences. Sorry for saying it that way, but yeah, I mean, I think that's where the strength is, and I think that those of us who are going to, again, hunker down, limit our perspective, hold on to the past, are doomed. And as uncomfortable as it is, we have to get off our butts and take a risk.
Well, and so that makes for a really good business model for people who are in the world of counseling. And where do you find your best, they're not patients, but
right.
your best clientele
yeah, right.
is people who, and that word stuck.
Right.
When you identify that people are stuck, do you have techniques that you find are useful to help people get unstuck?
I come at this from a more of a psychological and actually more of a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
And the primary idea that I work with is that the career you want is already inside you. That on some deep level what you're good at, what you love to do, what is needed out there, what the world needs, what you can get paid for. These are the elements of what the Japanese call ikigai, understanding your purpose. So I believe it's already inside you. We get so many signals from the external world around what we should do, how we should look, what the steps are to do this, ABC. And we are now in a world digitally where we are assaulted by information in these really digestible, clickbaity segments where it's the 5 top things to do this, avoid this, do that. Here's a 5-year-old real estate investor who makes $3 million a month. It's confusing. And if we try to chase the signals that are coming at us from the outside, and in career, this means chasing job openings, applying to 50 different jobs that you see online, jobs that maybe you can do, but you're not going to get because it's not really the job that you should be doing. If you get into this mindset of external focus, it's not going to work for you. You really have to figure out how to pull it back and meditate really on who you are, why you do what you do, and where do you want to take it? Where do you want to go?
I talk to people all the time who are in some state of stuckness. And to your point, the stimuli from the exterior are confusing them and distracting them from as you said, the ikigai and finding that inner purpose. Do you find that people know how to meditate on this? And can you help to enlighten me? How would I embrace meditation in order to determine my ikigai and find my way out?
Right. Number of different techniques. So one technique which I encourage everyone to do is to journal every day. And this is not, dear diary, today I ate 3 chocolate chip cookies and feel bad about it. It's more of what the writer Julia Cameron calls morning pages, which is this idea of if you are an artist and you are blocked, a writer and you're blocked, you use the journal to write about everything except the work that you're doing. It's all of the anxiety, the stream of consciousness that's coming up, even to the extent of your being blocked at the journal process. It's a way of just getting words out of your head onto the page as a means to connect to your unconscious, to that part of you that already knows. So I write, and in her book, The Artist's Way, which I would definitely recommend, she talks about doing 3 pages a day. That's a lot to do. I use one of these Moleskine style notebooks, and I basically do a page. So
that's very manageable,
right? So I do a page longhand, illegible mostly, because I never reread it. It's not about collecting your thoughts that you're going to publish or share or whatever. It's about getting it out of your head. It's about experiencing this retrospective, introspective insight that comes out from just listening to yourself think. And in that sense, it's very much of a meditative process, because a lot of what meditation is about is listening to what comes up, releasing the thought, letting it go, and waiting for the next one to come up. And pretty soon, if you keep doing this, all your thoughts are out. You're gone. You're not thinking about anything. You're just being in the moment. And that's enormously healing and restorative, to be present. Just be present with yourself in a sense of acceptance of the moment. And from that moment, from that void, if you will, of nothing going on, ideas happen, inspiration happens. You hear things, right? From within, from that part of you that knows what's going on. And that part of you says, okay, we can get to work now because you've gotten rid of all that extraneous BS, all the stuff you have to do today, everything that's on your agenda, all of your obligations, whatever. It's now just about you and what you were here to do. And particularly for those of us who are older, who are wondering what our purpose is beyond making a living, now is a great time for us to be introspective and to listen to that part of us that knows what the reinvention is going to be and is able to say to us, try this, take this step. It's not the answer. It's not necessarily that, oh my God, I now know what I'm going to do. I know what my life's purpose is. Yay. It's not that at all. It's just a step.
Yeah. And so what you're talking about resonates a lot with me because you have a quote in your LinkedIn about you didn't come this far just to go this far or something similar to that. We're all in some form of reinvention. How many people do you find really embrace that learning as a stepping stone to something new versus leveraging it as a reinforcement to keep doing what's inside? Do you know what I mean? How many people are really looking for something new?
I can't answer that question because if they're looking for something new, if they're looking for some way of redeveloping and going to that next level, then they're working with me. If they're not, then they're not working with me, right? I'm not going to be of interest because I'm not going to be reinforcing what they have done in the past. I'm not the right guy for them. And so, sorry.
Don't apologize. I was thinking about the comment that you had made earlier. I was trying to see if I put it in my notes about that person that you are, that purpose that you have. It's in there. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about a client that I'm working with right now who has been in this brilliant woman, and she's been in her position with her company through different roles for over 25 years. And kids are out of the house. She and her husband are doing great. And she's actually okay at the company, but she wants more. She feels like now is the time to do something. But she doesn't want to commit to one thing over another. She doesn't want to be forced into some kind of a path. And I said to her, it's not about committing to one path or another. It's about committing to you in all of the ways in which you manifest. And we're working on her LinkedIn about section, and she's trying to get it right. And I appreciate that. We all, if we're ambitious achievers, we want to get it right? It's kind of who we are. That's how we've rolled. And I just want to say to that voice inside me and people who are like that, you're in this case, the about section of your LinkedIn profile is not a definitive statement about who you are and what you want to do. It's an opening statement. It's the way to begin a conversation with someone out there who you're trying to connect with and find affinity with.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that this next step in the reinvention process is to get into conversations with people and to basically say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. What are you doing? Right? What's your experience been? Let's trade some experiences and some insights and see if we can support one another in this, as opposed to finding out what is the way. Right?
And yeah, most of the people I work with are type A achievers and talk about wanting to get it right. I know so many people who are going to listen to this and say, okay, so how do I fix me? How do I figure out where do I go next?
Right. So, well, first of all, you don't need to fix you. right? You're already fine, right?
Oh, but so many people say that. I'm not fine. I need to, but what I also think is so interesting, we're all multidimensional, interesting
Right.
human beings.
Right.
Embrace
Right.
the this and that.
Right.
You don't have to be one or the other.
Right. I mean, I would even say, and this may get too airy fairy for people. It's like, embrace your not fineness with yourself. Embrace the fact that you're not fine. Embrace that side of you that is skeptical and questioning and driving you and pushing you. Don't take that as being a negative. What if it were a positive? Because it's not all of who you are. It's part of who you are. You want to be the conductor of your own orchestra, right? And if your bassoon section is honking very loudly, you want to say to the bassoon section, guys, tone it down a little bit and play nice with the rest of the woodwinds and the strings, right? And if the strings are going, well, I can't get anything out there because the bassoons are just blowing my ears off. It's like, well, maybe you need to step up a little bit and do a little bit more, be a little bit more assertive, right?
Yeah.
So you can have these dialogues with all the various aspects of yourself, which is where the journal comes in, because you can allow those various aspects to express, right? You can, as foolish as it might feel to you, and you don't have to tell anybody you're doing this, you can sit down for a journal session and say, okay, I'm going to access that part of me that doesn't want to meet anybody new, that is shy, that wants to stay home, that wants to watch TV all the time, that I usually don't want to think about because I'm ashamed of that part of me, because that part of me is not getting anything done. Well, what does that part of you have to say? If you could just give that part of you 10 minutes to communicate with you, what could you maybe learn from that part of you? How could you extend yourself to that part of you and integrate that part with that ambitious hard driver? So maybe they can work together somehow, and the hard driver can figure out a way to lovingly bring that shy, retiring TV watcher out into the world, and maybe they can learn something from each other.
One of the most interesting elements of the last few years is how mental illness has become a number one medical concern, and how many people, myself included, over the last few years have not been as rigorous, or just feeling tired, just worn out and exhausted by almost by nothing, John. Some days.
Right. Thank you for saying this. This is really important. I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Absolutely. And you kind of like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you kind of think, what's going on? Something must be wrong. I must be sick. I mean, I'm like nodding off at 3 PM and I can't focus. What's going on? And it's not COVID. It's not long COVID. Something's wrong.
The last week or so, true confessions here. My own journaling is, all right, Meg, we are back to open for business. We are back to getting on airplanes. We are hugging and shaking hands and we're doing it like we used to do it. So why aren't you out there? Why at 4:30, when the bottle comes out and the cork is removed, why is there a second or a third glass by 6 o'clock? That then removes any aspiration
right
to continue through the journaling process. Say, all right, I feel bad, I feel guilty about X, that I had those 3 cookies that you mentioned earlier, and then tucking that away into a safe place, but getting that energy, the flow back out to doing more productive things. That's been a challenge.
Yeah, I hear you. And all sorts I wrestle with the same kinds of issues about, how to kind of recalibrate things. So I'm always changing my schedule up. People talk about morning routine, right? It's like, here's the morning routine that Elon Musk uses, or that, pick your celebrity. How Gwyneth Paltrow starts the day. I mean, it's ridiculous. You've got to find a morning routine that works for you. And your morning routine might be from 10 PM to midnight every night, because that's when it's quiet at home and you actually find a resurgence of energy that allows you to focus and prepare for the next day, so that when the morning comes around, you don't have to have a morning routine. You've already done it, right? So I think we have to find, this is back to acceptance and back to journaling. We have to find ways in which we can adjust to this crazy world that we live in with all of this input that affects us. It really, really affects us, even though we can scan those headlines and listen to those news reports and go, wow, 15,000 people dead in Turkey. Wow. I'm writing a check. I'm, doing whatever I'm doing. But that on top of the last thing, on top of, are we in a third world war possibly? All sorts of crazy shit. And by the time this podcast is on your archive now for a year and someone's listening to it, God knows what's going to be going on a year from now.
Shudder to think.
Exactly. So no wonder there's a second glass coming out at 5:30. I hear you, right? We got to do something about this. Maybe in the spirit of small habit changes, maybe there's a new habit that you want to bring out about that. Maybe you want to change up your poison once or twice a week. Maybe there's a certain mindfulness that you can bring to that and say, well, let me try something different today, right? Is it the amount, or is it actually the fact of the glass? Maybe I should pour into a smaller glass, right? And let me try sipping that glass as opposed to that big balloon and I'm gulping that down. Maybe there's another way of doing it. Experiment, right? See what works. So look, we all are wrestling with these vulnerabilities, right? In the face of systemic change happening at a greater pace than ever before.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to just talk about reinvention as if, oh, let's reinvent ourselves. Sure. Step A, B, and C. There are too many mitigating factors, complicating factors. Each one of us is different. We are all in different situations. We have different tolerances, many of which we're just discovering for the first time because we're being confronted by all of these changes. So our resilience, is different. We are getting older. I'm all for being positive about age. I think there is a certain amount of denial that's also going on in the world of positive aging. This idea that the death is a disease. No, death is not a disease. Death is death, right? It's an inevitability. Can we live better? Of course. Is there great science around this? Fantastic science. Are there wonderful wellness processes that we can do? Absolutely. Let's do all of that stuff. And at the same time, let's be conscious of the fact that we're all going to die, right? So let's make the most of every day, right? Whatever that looks like, let's try to be a little bit more mindful, accept ourselves, forgive ourselves, love ourselves, and give ourselves the chance to access, again, that part of us inside that knows what's what.
And you had said something earlier that I am such a strong believer in, and that is community networking, the power of positive thinking. We're stronger together than we are alone. And to release those vulnerabilities to the group, because that's what makes you normal, then it's easier to repair and move on. I think, as you'd said, once those roadblocks are identified, they can be moved, maybe not removed, but they can be moved or altered once they're identified, and having a posse around you who's going to help to elevate and escalate the process. And
remind you, right? And hold you accountable, right? To help you serve your better angels. And that gets back to coaching. Coaching, I think, you're talking about coaching being a very popular phenomenon across so many areas. My area of career is just one of them, but it's about performance, right? We want to perform at a higher level when confronted with all of these challenges. So Athletes always work with coaches because coaches hold them accountable to their program. Change the program up, work with them, are resourceful about giving them ideas so that they can achieve the performance they want with a program. That's what coaching really is about. It's really about supporting those goals in a systematic way, which is hard to do on your own.
And the title of the show is Free Agent, because we are all free agents. But to your point, the people who come through free agency and find their new posse, their new team, their new herd, are the ones who are working with someone. When you become a free agent in the NFL, you're extremely vulnerable and not as likely to get back unless you've got your mentors, you've got your coaches around you who are going to keep you game ready and able to step onto the field as soon as your name is called.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. One of the,
if I may, let's run with that metaphor. Let's run with that free agent metaphor.
Yeah.
Because one of the points that I make about career today is that, in essence, we're all free agents. There is no longer this compact that used to exist between corporation and employee. We've seen this atrophy now over the last 30 years. It is continuing to atrophy. At this particular point in time, we have extremely low unemployment, but that doesn't mean that companies have our back, because their businesses are too unpredictable, too volatile, too changeable to be able to really accurately predict that the workforce they have now is the workforce they're going to need in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So we have to think of ourselves as consultants providing value to a client rather than as employees delivering work to a manager. Because we're not going to survive if we're always focused, again, on the external, on delivering that job, right? That report or that presentation or that research to our supervisor. We need to provide more. We need to be more conscious of what the value really is that we can provide, that we should provide, that we can provide. And that's what gives us some permanence and persistence in the marketplace, because we are our resource. We are a consultant. We have a portfolio of deliverables that we can productize and deliver.
And to continue to educate ourselves and become familiar with new ways of thinking within a company, for example, like the gal you were talking about previously. You don't stay with one company for 25 years in the same position unless you're an accountant or someone who's got very predictable job boundaries. To continue to look outside of your own area and say, oh, that looks interesting. That ability to learn something new makes us that much more valuable. Right. And I think it also contributes to lifetime happiness. I'll be 60 next month. So I'm 60 going on 38. I'm not denying anything, but that's how I feel. And I see people adding more value by joining a book club or picking up a new fitness routine, Pilates or yoga or something that's age friendly with where you are. It opens your mind and it opens possibilities to new opportunities, because now you're listening to your body and your brain in ways that you haven't previously.
Yep. Growth mindset, right? All about life as a learning experience, and that by embracing the new, it makes us stronger and more successful.
Do you have any, I was like, success stories or someone that tickled you as you've been working with them with their particular outcome? Do you have any story a snippet that you could convey about this journaling and the process and a successful outcome?
As we're talking, I'm thinking about one client in particular who, and it's not specifically about the journaling, but it is about the reevaluation, reinvention process, and his willingness to really adjust to every step along the way in his transition process. This is a guy who is in his 40s, has a wife, young family, in the supply chain, kind of food and beverage industry, let's say. Went to business school, kind of shot out of a cannon, probably a bit arrogant in his 20s and 30s. Worked for some good companies, did some good work, and things kind of fell apart in the pandemic or before the pandemic. And he and his wife decided to do something they had each always wanted to do, which was to open up their own food business. Moved to a new city where the demographics were right, opened up this business. They did okay. All during the pandemic, they did okay. They actually were able to set it up, run it, but it was 24/7. And he came to me and he said, look, I want to get back to corporate, but I'm just drowning. I don't know how to organize my life to get out from under this business. And I'm a slave to this business. So it became a process of really taking this in gradual steps, understanding what he could offload, how he could invest a little bit wisely in his time management and the resources in the business, sharing responsibilities with his wife and partner, all the while reimagining and kind of taking stock of how he had changed over the years, what he had learned, and how he wanted to reposition himself now going back out to try to get a corporate supply chain and operations position. And he was really, really dedicated about this. He just did his homework, not because I told him to, but because he saw what the value was and he could visualize how this was going to be. And we worked a lot on those visualizations about where he was going to be in 6 months and kind of doing some reverse engineering about, okay, well, if you want to get to there, start working backwards from there to where you are now and what do you have to do? So he kind of figured a bunch of mechanical steps out from there. And it went very fast. And I think partially because he was in the right business at the right time. This was last year, so kind of coming out of the pandemic. And he also had a really clear sense of his own values about the kinds of people he didn't want to work for, the ones he did want to work for. And he was able to have those conversations in his interviews and in his contacts with the recruiters that he was engaging with so that he could do some gating around the opportunities out there. And he discarded a lot of opportunities. He didn't even go in on these opportunities because he didn't like the companies. Just had too many questions about it. He didn't want to waste his time. And at the end, it came down to 2 offers. And there was a month where it was going back and forth and back and forth. What was really interesting was the deeper he got into the dialogue with these 2 companies, his perception of them completely flipped. Initially, there was the one company that he thought he was going to accept was kind of had all of these positives associated with it. The other one was too risky. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but over the course of engaging with him, he began to realize that the company that he thought was the one with all the values, et cetera, they started making little statements and things were going on, and it just wasn't ringing true. Meanwhile, this riskier company just kept working with him really consistently and openly and admitted to, when he would say, look, I'm really concerned about this aspect of you. You're a startup, there's this, there's the money, and they would say, we hear you. we completely understand your concern and your reticence. And here's what we would say to that. Here's how we've been dealing with it. Da, 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 da. And so that transparency really drew him in, and they wound up with that second company. And I checked in with him about a month ago, and he's loving it. He's just absolutely loving it. It worked out. So maybe that answers your question about process here and about this more evaluative, introspective, critical thinking process that we have to go into, particularly in mid to late career when we're making these changes into a role that is not forever, right? But it's going to be a significant marker on our career journey. We want to make every one of those markers a significant uplifting, up-leveling experience.
So many great lessons in that little story. One, pivoted into a business that he and his wife really wanted to get into. Number one, it's a change, doing something different that they'd never done before. Getting into it and doing it successfully is naturally reinforcing, and you want to continue to do more because now you've met success, particularly in a time when other people are clearly folding, dissolving, blowing away. So ego marker number two. Then realizing, and I see this, John, with some of the people I have worked with in the past who were corporate refugees, who ended up buying a business and realized they love owning the business, but they're no longer part of a posse or a herd that they relate to. They're independent. They're the leader of the band. They're the buck stops here, and they want to gravitate back. Maybe that's part of what your guy was going back to. Mm-hmm. No harm in that.
Yep.
And so does his wife still run the business for them?
No, they sold it.
Oh, they sold it. Nice. So they had an exit out of it too, which is always successful. People ask me, well, how do you know if it was a successful exit? Like they had a business entity and they sold it.
Right. By definition, right?
By definition, we've got success right there. Anyway, that was a great, great story to share with the listeners, really identifying how many pivots had to be gone through. One of the things that I will say really resonates with me in the work that I do is there is no one right answer for everybody, but the more transparent and willing you are to be vulnerable in your due diligence.
Yes.
Like the company that he thought he was gravitating towards, it would be really easy to say, all done, decision made. But he kept digging for what was disingenuous and or didn't feel right.
Yeah. He kept slowing it down. Right. I actually have another client right now who's going through a dance with a company. He has an offer, and the timing is exquisite because he's in the technology field. He's with a big name brand, not a FANG company, but on that level, in a very senior sales and marketing position. His whole team is dissolving around him. And in the midst of this, he got this feeler for an emerging company in his sector. Great PR, great business, great numbers, great position. It's a EVP position. And we're just talking about the offer that came in. Well, the offer has lots of red flags in it. It's not about the money. It's about the boilerplate. It's about the condition. It's about the policies. It's about what the offer says about how the company views its people. And so he's negotiating. Right. And we'll see what happens. But it was very interesting to see because all of the conversations he had, CEO, the board, everything was just so lovey-dovey and smart and strategic and, all bells ringing. Now, interesting, right?
And as one of my attorney friends said, with those contracts, it's just as interesting what is included as what is not stated. by omission, purposeful, intentional.
Yep.
We don't want you to know about that.
Yeah.
So to be able to do the digging and this whole conversation about reinvention, no one wants to go as far into it and decide that it is time and they've got the ability to do it. Just to, as one friend of mine said the other day, she climbed the ladder, but she realized not only was it the wrong ladder, but it was leaning against the wrong wall. She
great analogy.
Had done so much to rejigger her career, and then realized, and we see a lot of people like this who are maybe going to law school and they come out of it and say, holy crap, this is not what I thought, and I don't want to do this anymore. Right. We pay our dues and we pay our tuition to learn some of these things. But the beautiful thing about you and your point of view is this scope of stories and experiences that you're aggregating and sharing with your LinkedIn and also your book. And so for anyone who didn't catch it at the beginning, it's the Boomer Reinvention. Are you working on any other publications right now?
I'm just working on my blog. I try to get a blog post out every week or two to really shed some very specific actionable light on all of these elements of career transition in mid and late career. Well,
so I will tell everybody at the end of this here, follow John's posts. They're all chock full of really good, useful, insightful information. Some of them will make you smile. Some of them will make you hold your head in your hands and say, am I the only one feeling like this? But the beautiful thing about your blog too is how you normalize the conversation to make it okay to be vulnerable. And it's, as you said, you got to take that baggage and get it out so that you can let other things happen. So thank you so much for being on again, John. This has been a great conversation, chock full of really good insights and information. And it's always great to see you and your smiling face. And we'll look forward to having you on again in the future, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your audience.